Hey guys, good morning. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about some of our mechanisms of evolution. So we've already talked about Darwin, we talked about some of his ideas in natural selection, and so now we're going to move on to some other types of evolution that you need to know. All right, so some of y'all have been asking me about your grades. So gradebook closed right as we ended genetics. And so now that we're in evolution, we're taking grades for the six weeks. So all of the stuff for genetics is closed. All right, so there's no redoing those assignments. There's no making those assignments up because now we're on evolution. Okay, so if you have any questions about any of those, definitely email me or text me on Remind and I'll make sure to get back to you guys. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so what we're going to talk about, okay, we're going to talk about mechanisms of evolution. So when we're talking about mechanisms of evolution, we're talking about things that allow evolution to occur. So our first example is genetic recombination. So I know that word sounds really big, but you actually already know about this. So remember during meiosis when we talked about crossing over, we talked about how everybody has pairs of chromosomes. You get half of your chromosomes from mom and the other half from dad. And so those chromosomes will match up. And what happens during crossing over is those chromosomes will exchange genetic information. So if you look right here where the chromosomes are touching, they're going to exchange that genetic information. And so what happens is that allows for variation when meiosis occurs. And those variations can be crucial, especially for organisms out in the wild. It could help increase their fitness and it could also help decrease their fitness. We also have genetic drift. So for genetic drift, some individuals just by chance end up leaving more offspring than others. And so on occasion, you have genes passed on to those offspring who make them more lucky, or if we're talking scientifically, make them more fit. But it's completely by chance, completely random. So for example, okay, so if you have a bunch of bugs here, okay, so you have some green bugs, you have some brown bugs. So normally during natural selection, the brown bugs would be the ones to blend into their environment. And so more likely the green bugs would get eaten. And so with genetic drift, it's completely random. Somebody walks by, steps on a bunch of bugs. It's not like you're picking which bugs to step on. And so it's just completely random which bugs end up surviving. Okay, so this would be the same thing, for example, if you had a volcanic eruption or an earthquake and it wiped out a whole population. It's completely by chance, completely random. We also have something called gene flow. And so when we're talking about gene flow, we're talking about introducing new alleles in or out of the population. So remember, alleles are going to be your variations of genes. So maybe you have an allele for having a green bug or an allele for having a brown bug. And so you're going to have movement of these traits, and it's going to cause those alleles to have higher frequency. So for example, if I have two populations of bugs here, okay, I have a green population and a brown population, and one of these brown bugs moves over to these green bug population, if that brown bug doesn't get killed and it mates with one of these green bugs, it could potentially pass on its brown gene to some of those offspring. Okay, so we already talked about genetic recombination. Okay, so genetic mutations. So genetic mutations, we actually do see. So you could have a genetic mutation and it changes how those genes are going to act. So for example, we have this bacteria, H. pylori. Okay, so you normally have them in your stomach and it's going to help produce an enzyme. And so normally H. pylori will help you digest certain foods. But if you get too many H. pylori, it's going to upset your stomach. If you get too few H. pylori, it could, cause some different damages. So if you have too much H. pylori, a doctor is going to give an antibiotic and it's going to cause those bacteria to die. But on occasion, you can get an antibiotic resistant bacteria. It's a mutant where it doesn't produce an enzyme. And if you apply that antibiotic, it's still going to survive. And so that's why sometimes, like if you look at the back of an antibiotic, soap or the alcohol gel, stuff like that, it'll say kills 99.9% of bacteria. That's because 0.1% of the bacteria is actually immune. And so it can be bad because if you're using it, you end up with just that 0.1 bacteria that's resistant, that's surviving. And so that's what's left that's going to reproduce. So obviously right now when we're, at home and we're trying to protect ourselves from the coronavirus, it's completely different. You are supposed to be using, alcohol gel, washing your hands, things like that. Okay? All right. So some other mechanisms of evolution. Okay, so we talked about mutations, changing up that DNA sequence. It can help or hurt an organism. Okay, what do you understand? So how is genetic drift different from gene flow? Okay, so remember, one of them is random. Okay, so genetic drift is the one that's random. Gene flow is the one where your alleles are flowing to a different population. They're moving. Okay, so genetic drift occurs when individuals completely by chance leave behind more offspring than others. Gene flow refers to the movement of new alleles in and out of the gene pool. Okay, so we have two models of evolution that you need to know. I know today's full of a lot of vocab. So we have punctuated equilibrium. Okay, so this is when you have a pattern of evolution where you have a long, stable period of that species, of that organism, of those traits existing, and then all of a sudden you have a really fast change. Okay, so that's what punctuated is. So punctuated, think about in English class when you have something that's punctuated. And so this can occur when small populations become isolated from larger ones or after mass extinctions. Because if you have mass extinctions, now you have an entire niche that can be filled by other organisms. We also have gradualism, okay, and this is exactly like it sounds. So you have a gradual amount of genetic changes accumulating over a long period of time. Okay, so the appearances of new species sometimes is very slow and steady according to the fossil record, and so it's because we had a gradual change. So what does that look like? Well, if I look at this model, okay, so we're going to use butterflies. So right here on the left, I have a gradualism model. Okay, so if I start off, okay, at a very, very old point in time, I have this butterfly that's a little bit black and has some yellow on it. So for gradualism, it's going to gradually change in color over a long period of time. And so we can see that if we look at our modern time, which is up here at the top, we have two different colors of these butterflies and even different shapes if we look at it. And so we could see that we had one branch where we had a lighter colored butterfly with little red dots and little pokey wings at the bottom. And then on the other side, we have this brownish orange butterfly with very rounded wings. And so we had a lot of little changes over a long period of time. So for punctuated equilibrium, we start with that same butterfly and it's going along, happily existing. And then all of a sudden, we branch out, we have this mutation that has this brown and orange butterfly. And then that brown and orange butterfly stays the same all the way through. And then if we keep on going in that original timeline, we have another branch off for that white and black butterfly with the little red dots. And then that butterfly will exist for a long period of time. So one of the differences is that for punctuated equilibrium, you could see we have three different types of butterflies at the end, while for gradualism we have two. All right, so next week we're going to go over our different evidences for evolution. So talking about things like fossil record, DNA, the geological changes in the earth and things like that. So go ahead, hop on over to your assignments and start practicing using this vocab because it is quite a bit of vocab for evolution, but the concepts are really easy. So I hope you guys have a great day. Stay safe. And I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.